Welcome, everyone. This is Haiti Policy House. My name is Wells Pamphile. I'm the founder and executive director of Haiti Policy House, and we are a research institute that focuses primarily on foreign policy that impacts Haiti. And today we have Dr. Robert Fatton, and who is an amazing individual who spent over 4 decades writing, researching, and talking about Haiti. And today we are here specifically to talk about um, Haiti Beyond Elections, and specifically the connections between Haiti, the elites, weak institutions, and also the struggle for democracy. So no other person is better to talk about this than Dr. Faton. I'm going to give you the floor, Dr. Faton, for introducing yourself, and also, if you don't mind giving us a brief overview of your thoughts so far on what's happening in Haiti over the past 3 5 years. And I'm pretty sure you can talk about a lot more the past 40 years, but just let us know what you're seeing and how you're perceiving things, and then I'll pass the mic over to you.
Okay, thank you. Well, first, let me thank you for inviting me. And I'm usually a bit of a pessimist, not only because I'm naturally pessimist, but because at one point I was an optimist. And every time I think things are going to change and change fundamentally in Haiti for more progressive kind of regime, more popular participation, more democracy, more sovereignty in Haiti, things don't follow my optimism. So now I'm kind of a pessimist because I remember, for instance, when Duvalier fell in 1986, I said, yeah. And I was on the verge of going back to Haiti. I had many friends who went back, many of them came back. And then I realized that, well, 1986 was a major event, but then we had crisis after crisis with military coup after military coup. And then we had the election of Jean-Bertrand Aristide. And again, I was very optimistic. I said, finally, we have a regime that is going to change things. And unfortunately, 7 months afterwards, I had to again say, well, this is not happening. And we had all of those negotiations between the United States, Haiti, and the military junta. And things ultimately led to the restoration of Aristide, but with a very big price, because whatever sovereignty we may have had started to dissipate very quickly with the second coming of Aristide, because as you know, Aristide was restored to the presidency precisely because of the massive intervention of the United States. And since then, we have had major missions, military missions, police missions, etc. in Haiti. We've had another intervention in 2004 with the French and the Americans, and then we had the United Nations, which had been in Haiti in the 1990s and early 2000s. Then we had the famous MINUSTA operation with 13,000 troops coming from Brazil, Chile, etc. And we hoped at that point that, well, order would be restored, that there would be a democratic regime, etc. And for a while, it looked like it might work, but eventually it failed, not only because of the politics of Haiti, but also because of major disasters like the earthquake of 2010. And things started to deteriorate afterwards. And very quickly, we had the presidency of Michel Martelly, which was a real problem for, I think, personally, for Haitian democracy. While I, like many Haitians, like Martelly's music, uh, as a president, we could have done much better. But he became president. There was a crisis at the end. There was a transitional period again. And eventually, we had Jovenel Moïse, who came to power only to be assassinated a few years afterwards. And since then, things have really deteriorated in a significant way. We've always have had gangs in Haiti, and not just in the modern period, but throughout Haitian history. But what is significant after the uh, coming to power and the assassination of Jovenel Moïse is that the gangs have become increasingly powerful, and not only increasingly powerful, but they have become autonomous. And what I mean by that is that in the history of Haiti, gangs were traditionally created, financed by so-called big men who had money, who had political aspirations, and they wanted, their guys, as it were, to make sure that their presence would be noted. But with the passage of time, and especially after the assassination of Moise, the gangs have become autonomous. So we've had a massive gangsterization of the country, which has led to all kinds of major issues politically, economically, morally, and we have a crisis that is multidimensional. We have an economic crisis, political crisis, a major crisis of security, probably the most acute that we've had, and obviously we have that political crisis. Now, since the uh, assassination of Moise, we had a short period where we had a peculiar regime that was eventually replaced, as you know, by the transitional presidential council. Now, what is interesting to note about the presidential council is that it was, for practical purposes, the creation of the United States, CARICOM, and some other major countries, the so-called core countries, like the French, like the Canadians, etc., but mainly the United States. And initially, the transitional presidential council looked like a major event in the sense that it looked like different political parties, different political leaders were able to get together and try to do something positive to move Haiti beyond that gangsterization, create an environment where you could have elections, where you could have also a truth commission, where you could maybe revise the constitution, etc. So there was something in the air saying, well, maybe this is different. Unfortunately, very quickly we realized that the members of the presidential council were kind of fighting each other. They managed to preserve the presidential council. They had some creative governance things. As you know, there are 9 members, and there are 7 members who are voting members. And initially, it was just a majority that would do it in terms of major decisions. But that led to serious conflicts, and they decided that you needed a supermajority. So that kind of preserved the presidential council. On the other hand, the promises of the presidential council were really massive. How to reestablish order, it wasn't clear how you would do that. Second, they said that they would create a new constitution, that there would be a referendum, and that by next year, by next February of 26, there would be an election with a legitimate government. Now, as we know now, we are in November almost of 2025. Nothing of this sort has happened. In the last few weeks, the idea of having a new constitution was just abandoned. There has been no truth commission, and clearly the crisis of security is very acute. It is so acute that initially the Presidential Council decided to accept the presence of the Kenyan contingent, the so-called MSS, which was supposed to help the country fight the gangs, tame their violence, and eventually create a climate of security. Well, the MSS has been a failure. The Haitian police has also been a failure. And whatever is left of the Haitian army has been unable to really turn the tide against the gangs. As far as we know, the gangs control about 90% of Port-au-Prince. They are moving into regional areas, and what is very dramatic and actually probably one maybe a catastrophe is the fact that the gangs have moved into L'Artibonite. And as you know, L'Artibonite is really the breadbasket of the country. And if they control that, then the food situation is going to be a disaster. We already have a very bad agricultural performance, but if you have gangs destroying, clinics, schools, and the fields of the peasantry, then we are in for something that is absolutely horrible. And in Port-au-Prince itself, in the environment of Port-au-Prince, you've had since 2022 something like 16,000 people killed in the violence. And one of the tragedies is that the gangs now are composed of very young people. And in some instances, according to UNICEF and the United Nations, you have kids literally as young as 8 who are part of the gangs, and they have guns, etc. And that is a real tragedy, because you are talking about a generation that has known nothing but violence, participated in the violence, and participated in very ugly kinds of violence. So that's a real issue. Now, if you look forward, there is a new UN mission that has been engineered by the United States and to some extent by Panama. And this is the so-called Gang Suppression Force. It is supposed to replace the MSS, the Kenyans. But so far, we don't know when that new mission is going to be deployed in Haiti. It's supposed to be larger than the MSS. The MSS was supposed to have 2,000 police officers, but ultimately only about 1,000 Kenyans were there. They were very poorly armed, and they were clearly a force that was way too small to deal with the gangs. Now, the gang suppression force is supposed to have something like 5,500 military officers and police officers. It is, if you compare it to MINUSTA, significantly smaller. MINUSTA had about 13,000 troops, and they were from, established armies of Latin America. And now we don't know who's going to be forming that force. The personnel has not been yet created, and there is a problem of money. The United States has said that it's not prepared to, pay for that entirely, but most other countries can't do it either or don't want to do it. So we have a problem of funding, a problem of knowing who in the heck is going to be part of that 5,500 force. And in addition to that, and this is a problem, that the force has been mandated to do essentially whatever it wants to deal with the gangs. In other words, they are to a large degree a sovereign force in Haiti itself. They can cooperate with the police, they can cooperate with the Haitian army, but they have the capacity to decide what they want to do in Haiti itself. And this is something that is problematic as far as I'm concerned, because if you want to transform Haiti, I think you need to have the institutions, whether it's the police or the army, that are prepared to engage, those gangs. And if ultimately it's left to a foreign force, it's unlikely that it's going to transform Haiti. It's going to be very much like what MINUSTA did. And once MINUSTA left, things started falling apart. So we have a problem in terms of foreign interference in Haiti and those foreign missions. It's not that we should not accept foreign assistance. A poor country like Haiti needs that foreign assistance, but that foreign assistance needs to be of a different kind, and it needs to be done on terms that are respectful of Haitian sovereignty. And I'm not sure that that suppression force is actually going to do that. So I have real concerns about that. And clearly, we are not going to have an election before February of 26, I mean, it's impossible. The security climate is such you can't have an election. If you had an election, it would be a disaster. In addition, we don't have a good voters list. The last voters list was established, I think it was 2002 or 2003. And as you know, the population in Haiti is a population that explodes. So you have plenty of people who could vote, I mean, young people, and they wouldn't be able to vote because they wouldn't have a card. But that's besides the point. The security situation, as far as I'm concerned, makes it impossible to have an election. There was a crazy idea that was put forward by the previous president of the council, Voltaire, who said, Leslie Voltaire, who said that maybe 50% of the population could vote, and that would be a good election. Well, I think this is really a fantasy, and it's a bad joke, actually, because if you have an election with 50% of the population, it's going to be a bad election. And as we know, elections in Haiti are times of crisis. Those who win, they say clearly that they've won and they want to win the whole pie. And those who lose say, well, we won, but we were defrauded. So if you have an election like that, it would really exacerbate the crisis. So we are at a point now where it's not clear at all what is going to happen. We don't know whether the presidential council is going to be eliminated. And if it is eliminated, what is going to replace it? There is talk about the creation of a presidency for the judicial system. In other words, the highest figure in the judicial system in Haiti would become president. To some extent, this is what had happened just before the election of Aristide. I forget, that's terrible. I forget the name of the lady who had the provisional president who organized the elections and eventually Aristide won. So that could be a possibility. There is talk also of having a smaller presidential council, and that might be a better deal. Who knows? But at the moment, we have no clue about what is going to happen when February of 26 occurs. There are discussions, but they are still very vague. And we don't know what the security situation is going to be, because as I've said, it's not at all clear when that new force from the UN is going to be deployed in Haiti. I've heard, and that may not be correct, that it wouldn't be deployed till April of 26. And that's a long transition because the gangs are moving fast and creating a lot of problems. Let me leave at that, because I think I've talked too much already.
No, thank you. I think that was an amazing overview because, again, there are a lot of moving parts in Haiti right now, especially for the past 5 years. And I think you're right with every time you think something's going to go right in Haiti, it's in the go. And even for me, I was optimistic about when they said they were going to do the transitional council with all the members. I'm like, oh, you know what? It's a great opportunity for folks to come and work together. But it's a great deception. You know, it's like to see it really fall apart like that with the corruption scandal with the three members, with the bank scandal, and now the lack of action or the lack of will to act. It's been very disappointing. But I have a question. So you kind of highlighted the history from Duvalier all the way down to Martelly and Jovenel, right?
Mhm.
And at every point, there was an opportunity to do something right, but then the wrong thing happened. What do you think has been the common thread or common denominator through that entire history?
Well, you have different things going on at the same time. On the one hand, you have the internal situation in Haiti and domestic politics in Haiti. On the other hand, you have the reality of constant foreign interference in Haiti. There hasn't been a moment since the fall of Duvalier in 86 that has not seen the interference of the United States. I mean, this is absolutely clear, not just the United States, other foreign powers. I mean, you talk about 1986, we know that it was under the Reagan administration. They eventually said, well, Duvalier has to go, so he's put on a plane and he leaves. Then you have all of the military things that have happened, and then you have Aristide. Aristide's rhetoric frightened the Haitian elite and the Haitian military. And the United States, some factions in the United States disliked Aristide profoundly, while in Haiti, the vast majority of Haitians, at least in the first term of Aristide, were widely, they supported Aristide widely, and there was no doubt about that. But then, the military and the Haitian elite, the traditional economic elite, decided that Aristide had to go. And part of the CIA decided also that Aristide had to go. And this is one of the interesting things when you look at the removal or overthrow of Aristide the first time, that the State Department was against the CIA, but the CIA decided that he had to go too. And we do know, because the archives have shown that several key members in the Haitian military were paid CIA agents. So they knew what they were doing. But then that created a problem because at that point, this was the high point of the so-called liberal democracy. The Soviet Union had collapsed. The United States was the only power in town, and they wanted to have some sort of liberal democracy spread all over the world. And clearly, having a military junta was not something that was very good. And there was also the Santiago Declaration that decided that there should be no military coup in Latin America. So initially, the Bush administration negotiated with the military, with Aristide's exile government for some type of solution. They couldn't do it, and eventually Clinton came to power, and he decided that he would do it, and he threatened the junta with an invasion of American forces, and that compelled the junta, General Cedras, etc., to exit the country. But there was a price to be paid with that intervention. As I've said, it was a sign of increasingly weak sovereignty and agency on the part of Haitians. In order for Aristide to be restored, he had to sign documents that compelled him to accept the economic programs of the World Bank and the IMF, programs that he had really, rejected when he was first elected. So that started to create serious problems. And there was also, in spite of the fact that he was restored to the presidency, significant opposition to Aristide on the part of the elite. And that polarized the situation further. And then the whole movement of Lavalas started to fragment. As you remember, Préval was elected, but then there were divisions within Lavalas, and Préval, to a large degree, could not govern because he had to consult Aristide, and he had to consult with his kind of center-right supporters, so that didn't work. And then there had the election of 2000. Aristide was elected president, but there was a massive, supposedly, fraud in the legislative elections. And that meant that the United States and the French decided that, well, those elections were not good enough. And they started pushing Aristide out. And we had a different government than Clinton. That was Bush, the son, in power, who disliked Aristide, and in particular the people around him disliked Aristide. So they started financing the opposition, and the opposition became increasingly large, and eventually Aristide had to depart, and he departed, in a rather bizarre way. And there was one thing that had to be mentioned also that accelerated the demise of Aristide, and that was the issue of the French debt. I don't know if
I remember the songs when I was a kid. They
Yeah,
had the
yeah,
songs on
absolutely.
the reparations.
And Aristide, Aristide was never afraid to confront, as they say in Haiti, le blanc.
Mhm.
In many speeches, and in one in particular, where he was talking to uh, all the ambassadors, and he pointed his finger at the ambassador of France and said, "You owe us that money. Don't give us any kind of moral argument. It's 21 billion. I don't remember how much it was, over 20." And the French disliked that profoundly, that they were, treated like that. And the French really, and it's becoming clear now, 25 years afterwards, when you read what the ambassador wrote in in his archives, that they were game to overthrow Aristide. They didn't want him there. And they generated a commission that was that was very strange because it was uh, headed by Régis Debray, who was a very well-known leftist who had been, with Che Guevara in the 70s. But Debray had changed radically, and he wrote a report saying, well, it's too bad. We did bad things, but we can't go back in history. We may help, but that's it. So there was resentment in France about that. So, and the United States didn't like him. So eventually, and the elite didn't like him, the army didn't like him, the remnants of the army didn't like him, and you had the proliferation of armed people then, people who were armed by Aristide himself and people who were armed by the different factions of the elite. And that is, to some extent, the beginning of the modern problem of the gangs in Haiti,
Mhm.
that they became affiliates of powerful people.
Mhm.
Uh, and As we know, the MINUSTA was created, Préval became president, and there was a moment again where Préval seemed to be capable of doing some very good things, not only nationally but also internationally. I mean, Préval had managed to have excellent relations with Cuba, with Chavez in Venezuela, and with the United States. And that's not an easy thing to do. And he managed to have assistance from all of those different and conflicting countries.
Mhm.
But as we know, the earthquake came and everything,
Yeah.
became.
So let me,
Uh,
we touched on the elites. I think that's the one part of this equation that most folks don't. Well, people know now because of the sanctions, and we've seen, some very high-profile arrests by the U.S. government, the ICE, recently with Reginald Boulos and also Dimitri Vorb. But I think for some folks who are not well versed on Haiti, who haven't been following for a while, because I remember I met somebody who said, "Well, who's Dimitri Vorb? Why is he important? Who's Boulos? Why is he important?" So, can you explain a little bit the history of the elites in Haiti from? I mean, we don't want to go back all the way to the early 1900s, but
yeah,
let's start with the fall of Duvalier or the rise of Duvalier, and then because Duvalier was part of his movement, the Noiriste,
mhm,
was a reaction to this specific group of
yeah.
people. So let's start from there, and then for folks who don't understand how um, the dynamics and also the connections or the um, what's called like a common ground between the elites and the United States as well.
Okay. Well, when we talk about the elite, it's a divided group because you have, on the one hand, the traditional economic elite, and that has traditionally been people of my color. In other words, the mulattoes.
Hmm.
They control the economic, if you wish, sector of Haiti. Then you have a different elite, a political elite, that controls political power. Now, at one point, the traditional elite controlled political power too. It was so-called la politique de doublure. In other words, you had black faces, but they were controlled by the traditional economic elite. And I'm simplifying because
Hmm.
even within the so-called mulatto, I mean, they're all kinds of different colors. I mean, in my family, you went from black to people who look like, I don't know, a blonde from Sweden, and it's the same family because we have so many. But in any case, that tended to be that, and that changed with Duvalier. Duvalier it had started to change with Estimé before, and that was the idea of noirism, as you put it. And noirism was the idea that the problems of Haiti were were caused by the mulatto. They were exploitative, which is absolutely true, but it was only part of it, because the political elite, in particular under Duvalier, did something that you find in many third world countries or global south countries. They captured the state and they used the state to enrich themselves. In other words, politics became a business, and a very violent business. When you took power, you wanted to keep it. And you wanted to keep it simply because this is where you could collect the resources, not just for you, but to build your clientele, etc. So under Duvalier, this was one of the major fights between the economic elite, traditional one, and the emerging political elite. That started to change when François Duvalier died in 71. There was the beginning of a merger, if you wish, between all of those elite forces. And that became very clear when Jean-Claude Duvalier was president and he married Michel Bennett. And Michel Bennett was, from a light-skinned family, from a fairly wealthy Bennett family, and the merging was quite important. And that meant that you had kind of a unified, to some extent, political and economic elite. And at one point in the 70s, that was the hope that Jean-Claude Duvalier would liberalize, and that if you listen to the slogans of the time coming from the United States, that Haiti was going to become the Taiwan of the Caribbean. In other words, the idea was that you would open up the economy, you would have small industries, they would export to the United States, etc. Now, that worked to some extent for 1 or 2 years, where there was kind of an economic boom. And there was also the revival of tourism in the late 70s. And that gave the impression that things were moving in the right direction. The problem is that when you liberalize, you need to liberalize completely, or you need to get it back. And that's one of the problems that Jean-Claude Duvalier found himself confronting. And eventually, as you know, in the late 70s, with the presidency of Jimmy Carter, there was an attempt to liberalize and human rights, etc. So the regime of Jean-Claude Duvalier liberalized in 78, 79, 1980. There was the possibility of even creating political parties. The press became freer. There was even talk about abolishing the presidency for life, etc. And that eventually created severe political problems. And they were compounded also by the economic crisis of the late 70s, the oil crisis in the first place, and then the debt crisis. So the economic and the political crisis merged in the 80s, and Duvalier decided to repress again. The macoute that had been pushed aside during the liberal period reappear, and the population at that point was fed up with Duvalier, and we know what happened in 1986. Is forced to go, and is forced to go not only because of internal pressures, but also because the Reagan administration decided that he was a problem that had to be dealt with. So they put him in a plane and he was gone. And one of the things that has to be emphasized is that you can't understand Haitian politics without putting it both in national and external and international arena. What I mean by that is that there is a coincidence of interest between the Haitian elite and the major powers. And this is absolutely critical to understand. At every major point in the last 50 years, not just the last 50 years, but for a very long time, the elite that takes power is to a large degree vassalized, as it were, by the major powers. You can see that when the return of Aristide, he had to sign those agreements with the World Bank and the IMF. Even when you look at the Transitional Presidential Council, initially many members of the Presidential Council did not want to have external interference in Haiti. And yet, when the United States said, well, you have to do it, what are you going to do? You can understand that position, but it creates a problem in terms of the capacity of Haitians to become their own agent. In other words, to make their own history. They are always involved with foreign powers. Until we can disentangle ourselves from that kind of subjection to foreign powers and dependence, I don't think we can change much in Haiti because the foreign powers, to a large extent, as I've said, see their interests with the elite. Those are the people they know. Those are the people who negotiate with them. Those are the businessmen, etc. So this is internal and external factors determine eventually what happens in Haiti. So Haitian leaders may have their own idiosyncrasies, but they can't do as they please. In fact, they are in many instances compelled to do as the major powers tell them to do.
So, within the same context of the elites, right? I know we talked about the beginning of the gang crisis during Aristide's last term in the early 2000s. We had we had like I mean, I think around the time we had Amnimete, we had Dread Wilme, we had a lot of
Yeah.
guys, the former barbecues
Yeah.
of the past, right? And for folks who don't understand, like, what is the connection between the political elites and also the economic elites with the gangs?
Well, there are divisions there very clearly, and it's kind of a obscure world because people are giving money to the gangs never tell you that they're giving money to the gangs, and the gangs also say that they are their own guys, as it were.
Yeah.
And in the from about I mean, I would say 2000 to 2006, the gangs were not autonomous. In other words, they were dependent on the different political and economic elites because there were members of the Senate, there were members of the government who were paying the gangs, and there were members of the economic elite paying the gangs too. So the gangs could be to some extent controlled by those powerful funding big guys, as it were. What has changed now is that the gangs have gained autonomy. The people who are paying them, and it's not clear that they are still paying them, but even if they were to continue to pay them, the gangs are a power unto themselves. And this is quite important to understand that you can't have a major politician or businessman calling, well, you have to stop this, stop that because we need some order now. No one is in charge of the gangs, and the government is not in charge of the gangs either. Although there might be connection, but no one is in charge in Haiti. What we've seen is really a fundamental weakening of the state. The state doesn't control its territory, period. It's something that is fascinating to see. You know, the members of the Presidential Council, they have a very hard time going to the Presidential Palace. I mean, the last time they went and the gang started shooting and they left. So, and then they had the Dessalines commemoration, and they didn't go down to the National Palace. They stayed, up in the hills, in the residence of the Prime Minister, to celebrate Dessalines. So you have a government that doesn't even control its geographical area, and that geographical area that they control is shrinking. I mean, Kinskov is becoming a problematic zone. La Lutte, all of those. I mean, it's besieged. And then one of the reasons why the gang can become increasingly autonomous is that they control the arteries of the country. They control, La Route du Sud, La Route du Nord. So what do? You tax people, pure and simple. They become to some extent mini states. So you can see that with the gas problem in Haiti. They can stop it. And if you want to have a truck with gas going to Port-au-Prince, you have to pay. There is no other way of doing it. So it's a power that is becoming increasingly independent of the state and of the economic elite. So till the state can restore order and restore its legitimacy, this is going to continue. So it's a fundamental problem for any political regime. Nothing can happen constructively with that kind of security situation.
So, now stepping back a little bit on the going back to the externally, right? We've seen the United States lately have taken a more, I don't know, you call it mano duro, like a stronger stance towards the business sector in the quote unquote elites in Haiti. But at the same time, we haven't seen the same thing happening in Haiti itself. Like Haiti, we haven't seen one arrest in Haiti in terms of like the folks who've been sanctioned or been accused of doing certain things with the gangs, right? How can Haitians or the Haitian government use this time right now, even though there is an incoming global the gang suppression force, there's a impending interference into Haiti right now, but how can Haitians regain or use this moment to regain their independence and reduce future external influence from the world powers like the US, Canada, and the others?
This is a very complicated business. And it's also, you would need a new diplomacy. There are certain things that have changed in the world that can give, to some extent, a way to diversify your dependence. I mean, on the one hand, you have the United States, which is still, the global power, but it's a global power that is increasingly challenged by China and by Russia and by other countries, the so-called global South, and with the phenomenon of the BRICS. So we are no longer like in the 1990s, where it was a completely unipolar world. Only the United States was the guy. They could do whatever they wanted, essentially, in the world. And they would get the support of Russia and probably the abstention of China. So remember the intervention in Kuwait, everyone was supporting the United States. Things started to change only when the United States went into Iraq. Then there was beginning of rumbling, and there was the emergence of Chinese power. Now, what I mean by that is that we have a multipolar world. And if you look at countries in the Caribbean that are, fairly poor and very much dependent on the United States, they've managed nonetheless to establish good relations with countries like India or China and even Russia. So it's not impossible if you have a smart diplomacy that you edge you bet. You're friendly with the Chinese if they give you something, friendly with the Russians, friendly with the Indians. There is a possibility of doing that. I mean, there are about, I think, most countries in CARICOM have very good relations with China and investments from China. That doesn't mean that they can't have good relations with the United States. But how do you manage that, especially under Trump, and especially when you are in the Caribbean and in Latin America? As we know, Trump has declared in any case that this is the Gulf of America. That tells you everything that you need to know. And he is threatening, the Colombians, he's threatening Venezuela, and he's bombing little, boats that supposedly are carrying drugs. Whether that's true or not, we can't tell. So there is, again, the Monroe Doctrine with a vengeance, that the United States wants to make it very clear that, as they used to say and continue to say, that the Caribbean or countries like Haiti are in their backyard. The question for Haitian is, can you have a room to maneuver? And I think there might be, but you would need to have very different governments and a different elite. And you would need, to some extent also, to be able to tell the American administration, we just want the investments of those other nations where this is not strategic or military. Please accept that. And it might work, I don't know, but we do know that many Caribbean nations have relations with the Chinese and with the Russians. I mean, the Dominican Republic has an embassy of China, has an embassy of Russia. So it's not impossible, but it is complicated. And we don't have a diplomacy that has managed to do that. We are still stuck within the United States, the French, and the Canadians. That's it. There's nothing wrong with having relations with those nations. Even if you didn't want to, you have to, because there is no other way. But you could probably, to some extent, create a form of. There are some scholars who have argued that there is such a thing as an active non-alignment. In other words, you don't align yourself with any power, but you're in good relations with all of them. You don't threaten anyone, and a country like Haiti can't threaten anyone. I mean, is the idea of having a different diplomacy that gives you openings and that may lead to investments from multiple different countries. You diversify, you dependent, so that to some extent by doing that, you're more sovereign. But again, the issue is which group in Haiti is prepared to do that, and it's not clear at all. Even if you had the freedom to do that, it's not, in my mind, I don't see any political forces in Haiti that are capable of doing it at that point. It may happen, but I don't see it. So how do you become more independent, as it were, is something that Haitians have yet, to generate. And I don't know really. But this is an issue that Haitians have to take into consideration. Otherwise, you'll be continuously dependent, and history is going to repeat itself.
Yeah, I agree with you because I think one thing I've learned in DC is you quickly see, well, when you're in DC, you see Haiti's diplomacy at work.
Mhm.
And sometimes when you are in rooms with Haiti's diplomats, if I don't know if any of them are watching this webinar right now, but I think you sense sometimes there's a sense of inferiority in the room sometimes when they're speaking and presenting themselves as like, or even if there's an opportunity to like oppose something that threatens Haiti. The likelihood of them actually, even diplomatically, to say something opposing to that, it's probably slim. And sometimes, it's like, well, what is the curriculum to training a diplomat in Haiti? Like how do you teach them to stand up to quote unquote like being the only black person in a white room or something like that, right? And I think the curriculum of diplomacy in Haiti also needs to be overhauled and changed as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, I agree. And we don't have a university or some diplomatic corps that is being developed at the moment.
Mhm,
I mean, everything has to be rebuilt or built
mhm.
in Haiti, and this is the reality. It's a country that has no real functioning institutions. Whether you look at the judicial system, political parties, even the business class. It's kind of a, you know, les amis des amis, as they say, friends of friends.
Friends of
You know,
friends.
and it's a family affair to family, family, family.
Hmm.
So the institutions are extremely weak. And at one point, we were talking about civil society, but civil society, to some extent, represents also uh, privileged groups
Hmm.
that are not fully connected to the population. And until you can bridge to some extent the gap between the vast majority of Haitians and those who control the economy and the political system, nothing is going to change because the gangs are, in fact, the product of that chasm between people who are doing well, privileged people, or relatively privileged, and the rest of the population. They are
Hmm.
living in the, you know, the bottom of Port-au-Prince in those slums. So they are kind of third-class citizen.
Hmm.
And that means that you have a polarization that is inviting of violence and of gangs, because whatever we may think about the gangs can portray themselves as people of that area
Yeah.
fighting the elite and
Hmm.
people, in power.
Hmm.
Uh, so till we change that, little is going to change.
Hmm.
But on the other hand, you have the issue of security. You need to have security in order to change the polarization and the class divisions and color divisions in Haiti.
Hmm.
Uh, but if you don't have order, it's not
Yeah.
going to happen.
We'll get back to the class and color division a little bit, but I just wanted to say, I think the one of the main thing that gives barbecue legitimacy, if we're gonna call legitimacy right now, is this class division. And I think, if there was ever a day when Haiti or Haitians stand up and say, you know what, no more class division, we're all working together, we all won. I think half of barbecue's rhetoric and propaganda goes away. But I do want to go back to real quick. So I have a question here that says, um, today's transitional council, FEMICI has one single female member, is also not a voting member. Um, how how about some kind of mandate for a women-led provisional government, or is this a crazy idea?
Well, I'm not sure whether it's a crazy idea because we need ideas to know where we are going after February or even before February.
Hmm.
Uh, the only time we had the provisional president who was more or less effective, that was a woman, and that was in
Is it Eta
19.
Pascal Trouillot?
Yeah, exactly. She
Hmm.
organized the elections. Uh, so, but on the other hand, it's not because you're a woman that you're going to have a different agenda than members of the elite, because you have plenty of women who are from the elite, and the agenda is not that different. They may
Hmm.
have, they are not men, but it's the same class
Same idea.
background.
Yeah.
So you need to to qualify this. Uh, but clearly, we need something else than what we have now. The transitional presidential council has not functioned. You have three guys who are accused of bribery, and they say that they're going to stay there and the hell with whomever, and even the judges, the judges can't even force them to appear. So we have a very complicated situation. But the presidential council is going to have a problem because there is already the beginning of what the hell are you doing this? When are you going to leave?
Hmm.
This is becoming an issue in Haiti, and a lot of the radio stations, the Renouvelist talks about it now. So we'll see what happens, and the foreign powers may also be tired of them.
Hmm.
And if the foreign powers are tired of them, then something is going to happen. So it's a time of confusion. It's a time when you have all kinds of morbid symptoms because the political situation is really in a state of uh, fundamental crisis. The old order is dying, but there's nothing to replace that old order. And when
Hmm.
you have that, you have those kinds of horrible uh, symptoms.
Hmm.
So, uh,
So
we're at a juncture.
We have a question here that talks about the other part of the island, the Dominican Republic. And it says, what role could or should the Dominican Republic um, play in Haiti in helping stabilize Haiti?
I don't know if they can play a role because you have
That's a
that
big
kind of
statement.
yeah yeah no, no. No, I mean I mean the Dominican Republic, for instance, has been deporting people who are supposedly Haitians to Haiti.
Hmm.
Significant number of people. Uh, you're talking about hundreds of thousands, and that is not helping Haiti when you have a crisis like that. In addition to that, they are taking a page from the Trump book. You know, they're building a wall. You
Hmm.
know, they want order. Now, there is another reality too, is that many of the wealthy Haitians have moved to the Dominican Republic.
And have
So
an
you
investment in DR.
exactly. So instead of investing in Haiti, they go to the Dominican Republic. And the Dominican government is quite clever. They like those people
Hmm.
because they bring money, etc. The poor Haitians are not welcome. That's the bottom line. Uh, you know, there was a moment during the after the earthquake where the Dominican Republic started to have better relations with Haiti. They even started to help. But one of the reasons they did that is because a lot of the resources that were needed for the rebuilding of Port-au-Prince after the earthquake, well, those resources were to be found in the Dominican Republic, and it was a good economic business. But you know, in the last few years, I think the issue of better or more constructive DR relations with Haiti, that idea started to deteriorate, and the Dominican Republic, to some extent, want its cake and eat it too. They want order in Haiti, but they don't want to be doing much about it. So this is why they have been calling for UN missions, etc., etc. Uh, on the other hand, the Haitian government is very weak compared to the Dominican government. And this is again, you know, at one point I said that Haiti was in the periphery of the world economy, but eventually I decided that Haiti is an outer periphery. In other words, it's in the periphery of the world economy, but it's in the periphery of the Dominican Republic. This is a sad reality that we've become dependent on the Dominican Republic, and we don't have the capacity to resist that power, and that many of the many Haitians who have you know who have means move to the Dominican Republic. That's the reality.
So, now, in terms of national cohesion
Mhm.
within Haiti, we talked about the elite. We talked about the equation or the formula that creates somebody like
Mhm.
barbecue, that creates
Mhm.
somebody who joins a gang.
Yeah,
Negan O, Negan Ba,
yeah.
people
Mhm.
up top of the hill, people at the bottom of the hill.
Mhm.
Do you see a need or do you see the possibility of a national reunification where the elite, I know even interesting because like sometimes you meet folks in Florida who says that they are of they're not Haitian, they are of Haitian descent, which is kind of weird.
Mhm.
They don't call themselves
Mhm.
Haitians, but it's do you think there's a time where the Haitian elite, whether political or economic, and everyday people in Haiti, like people who grew up in the province, people who grew up
Mhm.
in Okap in different parts of the country, can see themselves as one group of people who are, despite the different fraction, despite the difference in skin color and all those different things, see themselves as Haitians, or do you see a conversation of that sort even begin to take place, or is it even possible?
Well, you need that. I mean, otherwise the country is doomed. Because as I've said, the divisions that exist in Haiti are precisely the reasons why we have that violence. You can't have a country that is so deeply divided socially, where the inequalities are so manifest This is untenable. Now, the issue is how do you transform the country? And that is it's a monumental kind of effort. At the moment, I don't see it. And one of the problems that we find ourselves in is that if you want to reestablish order, you may do that, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get a government that is going to be fundamentally different. Precisely because if you establish order with foreign troops, the Haitian population is not invested in that thing. So this is a real problem. I mean, when you have the transitional presidential council calling on the private military firms, this is not appealing to Haitians. So you need some sort of you need to change that, and that's the question that so far, at least I don't have an answer for it. I wish I had an answer. I wish it would be feasible. It may happen because otherwise we are doomed. And to some extent, there are a few things that are interesting as a result of the gangsterization of Port-au-Prince. One is the capacity of poor people, local people, to organize themselves. The Bois Calais thing is important. It may degenerate, but it is important because they are doing it on their own. And this is the beginning of, okay, the government doesn't do it, no one is helping us, we are doing it. And it's a popular movement. Now, whether it can, generate the type of unity on a national basis, I don't know. But it's potentially positive. But it's also dangerous because those movements can be violent and can be a way to attack other people that you don't like, even if they are not part of the gangs. But it's nonetheless a phenomenon from the grassroots. The other important thing, and I think this is quite significant, is that the fact that the gangs control so much of Port-au-Prince has generated, a regionalization of the country that was necessary. In other
What do you mean
words,
by that?
sorry?
What do you mean by regionalization of the country?
In other words, that regions that had been left completely out of any central government thinking are back. Cape Haitian, Les Cayes, Jérémy, people have moved to those areas too. And ports are being built, little airports are being built. So this is the beginning of the, if you wish, regionalization of Haiti, that power would not just be in Port-au-Prince. And this is something that should be sustained if, the gangs are out, so that Les Cayes, Jérémy, Cape Haitian, Miragua, all of those areas that were left out of any project can become, more productive. And that's important. And there has been a significant movement of people precisely because the gangs have taken everything in Port-au-Prince. So this is an unintended effect, but it may have very positive consequences if it's nurtured.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I'm very terrified about what's happening in L'Artibonite, because in my mind, the only way Haiti can really become a different country is by generating an agricultural revolution so we can feed ourselves. And it's not kind of looking backward into some sort of rural paradise, because if you want to reestablish agricultural production, for food production in particular, you need to create, a core of people who know what they are doing with agriculture. You need to have roads, you need to have fertilizers, all of those things. So developing agriculture, in my view, is the most important thing, and you are targeting the people who have been, to a large degree, ignored since independence. Give them the capacity to produce for the Haitian population and food production. Now that's complicated because the programs of the IMF and the World Bank are just the opposite.
What do
You
you mean by
import the
opposite?
food, you import the food from elsewhere.
Okay.
If you look at, for instance, the rice production,
Mm-hmm.
up till 89, 90, we were producing essentially our own rice. And what happened? The, there was a problem of liberalization, taxes, tariffs were reduced completely. And what did we get? We first got rice from, where? Arkansas. And then we were getting rice from Vietnam. When we could clearly be food self-sufficient, but we've ignored agricultural production.
Mm-hmm.
And once you do that, you generate also commercial powers, people who are making money out of imports.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to fight those people if you want to have that program too. And not only just the IMF and the World Bank, which is bad enough, but you need to also have, you're going to confront the commercial classes in Haiti which have been making money just by importing and selling in Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a real problem. Agriculture, in my view, is the way out for the vast majority of Haitians, but a modern agriculture, with roads, irrigation, electrical plants, etc. So it has to be a comprehensive project.
So,
Yeah.
oh, no, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, we're almost at time, but
Okay.
um, now, in terms of the gangs themselves, we
Mhm.
have, like you said, a whole generation that know nothing but fighting. We have some of them have college education, some of them have been to school, some of them are lawyers and doctors, but some of them ended up joining a gang out of necessity, out of fear, out of pressure, you name it, they're part of a gang, right? What role do they play in rebuilding this Haiti that we're talking about?
That's a very good question. There are ways of looking at it. The question is, are the gangs so toxic that the only way you can deal with them is by defeating them militarily?
Hmm.
Or are the gangs, in particular, the very young people, people who can be reformed to some extent by giving them an alternative? That's the issue. Uh, and how do you do that? You could have a truth commission. People have called it different ways, where if there is some kind of ceasefire or peace agreement or whatever, where people who've committed crimes appear in front of that happened in South Africa. It doesn't resolve everything, but it's a way out. And there are also different levels of responsibility. If you are at the upper echelon of the gangs, I don't think you can treat those people the same way as you can treat, 10-year-old kid who has nothing but they was unlucky enough to be in a situation where he had to take a gun, otherwise he might be shot, otherwise he would go hungry. So I think there are differences there. So the question, and that should be, I think, a debate in Haiti, what to do with gang members. It's not something that can be just decided by the government. But if you want to deal with the gang problem, you need to change the distribution of power, the distribution of economic power. You need to establish a more equitable Haiti. You need to do things for people who've been marginalized for so long, schools, clinics, etc. One thing, though, with the gangs is that they've destroyed so many schools and clinics. That's where you see that they are not, they don't have a vision even for the people supposedly they are fighting for. If you are really kind of a progressive, let's say, guerrilla movement, you don't destroy those things. You preserve them and you improve them and you give that to the people. And that is something that has not happened, which is an indication that destruction is more in the mind of the gang leaders than anything else, and extortion. Most of the money doesn't go to the poor people. It goes to the top people, the top leadership. And there's also the issue of drugs, etc. So When we are talking about the gangs, I think we need to differentiate between those who are at the very top and the young people who have nothing else uh, but the gangs to survive. And they may, as you said, they may have joined the gangs because they were terrified or because they were threatened and because they are hungry.
Wow. I feel like we can talk forever. Um, do you have any final words? I know we didn't talk about we didn't talk specifically about the diaspora. We didn't talk specifically about different topics, but do you have any final words? Anything that we didn't talk about that you would like to touch on?
Yeah, well, I always finish those talks with a note of optimism. In other words,
I like how we're ending. I like that.
no, no, yeah, because you know, as I've said, I've become very pessimistic. But on the other hand, if you look at history in general, things happen and major things happen that were not expected at all, and some horrible things, but also some great things. I mean, when you think about it, we look at the situation in Haiti, you can say that 1804 was whatever problems there were after 1804, but nonetheless, 1804 is something that no one could have predicted. I mean, given the balance of forces. I mean, you had a bunch of slaves confronting, the most powerful European army, well trained, etc., with bows, and they were defeated. So it's not impossible to think that history can generate surprises. We don't see them. I'm not in Haiti now, so I don't know what's going on at the grassroots levels. There might be things there that are, to some extent, becoming increasingly apparent, but from the United States, I can't see them. So there might be something there. And you can't, as I've said, ignore, for instance, that issue of the decentralization of power in Haiti. I mean, the different regions which were left out may become increasingly important as a result of the decay of Port-au-Prince. And that's a good thing, actually. That if there is a positive thing about this horrible moment, is that people have been compelled to move out of Port-au-Prince, move out of the slums, and have gone to other areas of Haiti, and they may become more productive there. I don't know. This is a possibility. On the other hand, we are, you know, I'm just reminded of Melissa, who just destroyed part of the South. So here you have another problem. So people who move because of violence, they move to Les Cayes, or they move to Jérémie, and then boom, it's flooded, their houses are destroyed. So we are facing such an incredibly large number of crises that it's difficult to know where to start. But the main issue now is to reestablish a semblance of civility and so we can deal with the violence of the gangs so that can stop. And then we have the issue of reconstruction, which is another game altogether.
Listen, Dr. Fatton, again, I want to thank you so much
You're
because
welcome.
Haiti Policy House was created for to create a space for great minds like yourself. And I hope that someday like we can have you come up to DC to meet some more folks and talk more about Haiti.
I would love
Um,
that. I'm
and
retired, so I've free time. But I have a very bad back. I have to have surgery. So
okay,
after
well,
that,
I hope that goes well.
I
Again,
certainly hope so too.
truly appreciate you for joining us in Haiti Policy House with this panel. And I mean, I think, we need more of those conversations.
Yep.
We need more of that, and we need more, strategic. I also say like there's a lack of creativity when it comes to thinking about Haiti. And I think that lack of creativity leads to a lot of laziness, a lot of lazy policy decisions. And I think the more we can do on our end where we can, the more we should do. So
Well,
again, thank you so much. Thank you everyone
thank you to
for
you. That
awesome.
was a worthwhile conversation, and good luck with your organization. And I hope you can bring more discussions and ultimately that those discussions will have a positive effect, not only in Washington, but also in Haiti itself. So good luck, and
Yeah,
thanks
thank
again
you
for
so
inviting
much.
me.
Thank you. Thank you,
Take care.
everyone, for tuning in. We will be having a lot more events coming up for the rest of the year. And please subscribe, visit HaitiPolicyHouse.org, and we'll be in touch till next time. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
All right. Good night.
Bye-bye.